You're invited on a national television talk show under the pretense that someone you know has a crush on you. You get to the show and feel ambushed by the host revealing who it is. 3 days later, your crush has been murdered, and police are looking to you for the answers. My name is M. William Phelps. I'm an investigative journalist and the New York Times best-selling author of dozens of true crime books. I've dedicated the past 26 years of my life to helping families of the missing and murdered. Join me. We're crossing the line.
America's most notorious madams. Meet the Rolodex madam just out of prison. Another who runs an illegal brothel in Minnesota. Plus the owner of the famous Cottontail Ranch in Nevada.
A legal bordello makes for happier marriages.
Back in the 1980s and 1990s, daytime talk shows drew big ratings and large audiences, along with millions of daily viewers. I'm not talking about those cozy Kelly Clarkson-like shows of today, which are more or less an hour-long commercial for the media company who owns the show to promote its films, new music releases, and celebrities. I am referring to host-driven shows like Maury Povich, Jerry Springer, Sally Jessy Raphael, Geraldo, and Jenny Jones. For the most part, these were tasteless shows parading paternity tests, secret reveals, edgy social discourse, lots of true crime, at a time when a majority of the population looked down on true crime and considered it tabloidish trash, with the occasional onstage fight, flying chairs, and guests duking it out as the studio audience cheered them on. It was a time when divisive subjects actually shocked people, unlike today. The syndicated Jenny Jones Show ran from 1991 to 2003. Initially, the show was presented as a fun, uplifting, and non-confrontational lifestyle hour, drawing heavily on Jenny Jones's background as a stand-up comic. And while the show was originally seen as a lighthearted, positive alternative to what was a more vulgar and overly dramatic daytime television landscape, the Jenny Jones Show ultimately became famous as one of the pioneering tabloid talk shows of its time. When it began, Bubbly Jenny came out and introduced a fluffy lifestyle segment or a celebrity. Think Drew Barrymore or the Today Show's extended segment, Jenny and Friends. All that forced smiling, fake laughing at stupid jokes, an absolute obvious, transparent camaraderie with the guest and anything they might say. You get what I am saying here, the phoniness of it all. The idea that most of the segments are designed to sell us something, albeit a new product being pimped by a celebrity, a film, music, a book, etc. In 1992, Jenny Jones made a courageous move on her show. She decided to dedicate the entire hour to one topic, herself. The new format began with Jenny revealing that her silicone breast implants had ruptured, causing her 11 years of severe health complications and pain. The episode was a massive success. Huge hit. The audience responded to the emotional component Jenny brought to her stage. It was real. They could relate to the story on a human level. And so a new format was born. Producers, of course, picked up on the obvious idea that audience wanted raw, deeply personal, and serious human stories rather than lighthearted comedy and fluffy, celebrity-driven nonsense. From that point, Jenny Jones pivoted to a more conflict-based hour every day, and the other talk shows followed her lead. I mean, Jenny hadn't invented the concept. but she did take it to another level. Topics on the show now range from extreme makeovers to body image for shock value to teens and parenting and lots of paternity and infidelity drama. Subjects which had the potential to heat things up on the stage, pit people against one another, and drive ratings through the roof. Of course, Maury Povich took this part of Jenny's success to another level altogether. But Jenny Jones was one of the first to bring it to a daytime audience. Then the unspeakable happened after the taping of one of Jenny Jones's shows. A guest was murdered. One of the topics Jenny focused on was secret crushes. You know, someone at your job or the guy or gal at the corner store, maybe a neighbor, a good friend, who has been secretly fawning over you. Jenny would bring the two of them on the show and reveal who had the secret crush. See if there were sparks, either created by Cupid or how upset you were by the reveal. Either way, the audience loved it. Lots of people referred to this as ambush television. On March 6th, 1995, a guy named Scott Amedure flies into Chicago to tape an episode of Jenny Jones titled Same-Sex Secret Crushes. Scott's crush doesn't know who he is or the title of the episode. He only knows that someone in his life has a crush on him, and it could be a man or a woman. This is 1995, remember, so homosexuality is marked by a very deep, intense polarization. The country had just come out of the catastrophic height of the HIV/AIDS epidemic from the late 80s and early 90s. Ignorance is still very much in the mainstream as far as HIV, AIDS, and homophobia is rampant. Polls from Gallup and the General Social Survey show that a clear majority of Americans, roughly 55 to 60%, at this time viewed homosexual relations as wrong or always wrong. And any support for same-sex marriage is virtually non-existent. And putting this case in the context of the time period is essential to understanding it and what happens. Scott Amedure was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the youngest of 6 children. His family relocated to Michigan shortly after Scott was born. At the age of 17, Scott quit high school to join the military, serving our country for several years before returning to Michigan. Back home, he takes on a job as a bartender at the Club Flamingo in Pontiac, a gay nightclub. And Scott, it's important to note, is an out and open gay man, unafraid to live the life the way he wants to. When Scott appears on Jenny Jones that March in 1995, he is 32 years old and living in Lake Orion, Michigan, a suburb of Detroit. Within that community, Scott often runs into 24-year-old Jonathan Schmitz, who is friends with a woman Scott hangs out with, Donna. So their interaction, John and Scott, is casual at best. 2 men living in the same area, brushing shoulders at the local store or in town, or when Scott goes over to see his friend Donna, who is neighbors with Jonathan. There's no indication in any of the research that they knew each other on any other level than that. Scott has that classic 90s look about him. Shortly cropped dark brown hair, feathery and receding, brown eyes, and a rather warm, easygoing smile. He's tall and he's handsome. People around him love Scott. He's harmless and friendly and rather quiet if you don't know him that well. Jonathan is the polar opposite in many ways. He's younger, for one, has grown up in Lake Orion and lived there all his life, has struggled with personal hardships and problems maintaining relationships, and has a history of mental illness, including bipolar and manic depression. He also suffers from Graves' disease, which is a thyroid condition, and has been lately, according to some of the research, grappling with substance abuse. With all of that, I am not sure why producers even allowed the guy to be a guest on Jenny's show, and the target of Scott's secret crush. He is, one could easily reckon, vulnerable and volatile at the same time. 3 days after he tapes the Jenny Jones Show segment, revealing his secret crush on Jonathan Schmitz, Scott is at home inside his trailer in Lake Orion. It's a chilly day, as March can be in Michigan. Scott is feeling rather indifferent, I think. He taped a daytime television segment, told Jonathan he had a crush on him, and Jonathan seemed rather nonplussed, embarrassed, yet also nervously smiling and laughing throughout most of the segment. The interaction between the two men on the show felt lighthearted. Jonathan even laughed when he walked out on stage and saw Scott and Donna. As the audience was hemming and hawing before he sat down, Scott stood and embraced him, to which Jonathan kind of recoiled a bit. When asked about his romantic preferences, Jonathan said that he was definitely heterosexual. So there would be no riding off into the sunset on a white horse for the two of them after the taping of the show. The issue here in that moment, and even before he is even asked to be on the show, is that Jonathan is attracted to the opposite sex. Producers knew that he was not homosexual. And that was one of the draws of the episode for them, I believe. They knew there would be some sort of contention because of this. And that's what they were aiming for. At home on March 9th, 3 days after the taping, Scott hears a knock on his door and he gets up to answer it. We should note that earlier that same day, Scott had left what has been called a, quote, sexually suggestive note on the front door of Jonathan's apartment. And I'll explain what that note said a little bit later on. After reading the note, Jonathan drove to a bank near his house. He withdrew a large sum of money. Then he went to the store and he bought a 12-gauge shotgun and some ammo. From the store, Jonathan drove directly to Scott's trailer. A couple of important things happened next. Reports confirmed that Jonathan parked his car, walked up to Scott's door, and, after knocking, simply asked, "Did you leave me that note?" Scott reportedly smiles coyly, according to several documents. "Yes," he says proudly. Jonathan says nothing more. He turns around, walks back to his car, grabs the weapon, loads several shells into the gun, and then walks back up to Scott's door. As he approaches the door, Scott must have seen what he was doing, and so he closes the door enough to where he can see Jonathan through the slight crack. Jonathan is there now on his doorstep, and he has the shotgun pointed at Scott. As you might have suspected, the murderer in this episode is not going to be the mystery, and you'll find out why in one moment. The theme of this episode is what happens after the murder of Scott Amedure. Because that murder changed daytime television, and certainly Jenny Jones. While in 2017, something shocking and alarming occurs with regards to this case. But let's get back to that March day, 3 days after the taping of the Secret Crush episode. When Scott sees the weapon, he begins to try to close the door. But Jonathan places the barrel of the weapon in between the door and the door jamb. As Scott realizes this, he begins to back away from the opening door towards the kitchen area of his trailer. Jonathan calmly walks in, sees Scott, says nothing, and then fires one of those 12-gauge shells into Scott's chest. Scott places his hands over his chest, in shock, no doubt, having a hard time believing that a simple crush could lead to such horrific violence, and he falls to his knees. Jonathan walks over to him and fires again, striking Scott in the chest for a second time, killing him. What an incredibly horrible way to die, knowing you are about to die. Scott had no chance. Jonathan didn't want to talk about it, tell Scott how he was feeling. He only wanted a place to purge all of that rage inside of him that he felt. And his lawyers will later say it was the note Scott left that lit the wick, pushing Jonathan across his threshold into violence. Now, I want to explain something important, which will come out later on. A friend of Scott's reports that after that taping of the show on March 6th, Scott and Jonathan went out for some drinks together. They sat and talked and had fun. Then they went to a local hotel room, according to Scott's friend, and they had sex. I need to take my first break. If you haven't subscribed to the show on the platform where you get your podcasts, you could miss out on episodes and bonus content I drop every so often. So hit that subscribe button, please. Also, check out my Patreon page. Just do a search for my name and Patreon, and you'll find it. There is also a link in the show notes. Unlike a lot of Patreon content providers, I do not charge a fee. It's free to sign up. I do live shows, post regular updates for this podcast, and drop exclusive content every so often you won't find anywhere else. I also conduct lengthy interviews with some of the most intriguing people in true crime today, such as the Golden State Killer prosecutor, Alex Murdaugh's attorney and true crime author, Aphrodite Jones, and much more. So check it out. As I said, it's free. You are listening to Crossing the Line with M. William Phelps, a true crime podcast. I'll be right back. After firing 2 shells into Scott Amadure's chest, killing him, Jonathan Schmitz walks back to his car, places the shotgun on the seat near him, and casually drives off. He is in no rush to get away. In fact, he drives up the road and stops at the nearest gas station. He gets out of the car. These situations usually go one of 2 ways. The killer kills himself, or he gets into it with law enforcement and basically commits suicide by cop. Jonathan does neither. Instead, he finds a payphone, calls 911, and tells the dispatcher, "I just shot a man." "Why did you do that?" the dispatcher asks. "He embarrassed me on national television." Jonathan is highly stressed and crying. He mentions the Jenny Jones show several times. He tells the dispatcher he felt humiliated while on the show. And there you have it. Motive and murder in one phone call. Not so fast. Daytime talk shows tape segments. It can take weeks, even months, to air them. That segment they taped with Scott revealing his secret crush had not even aired at the time Jonathan murdered Scott, and never would after what happened. So the idea that Jonathan had been embarrassed in front of a, quote, national audience is null and void. The only audience who saw the segment were the few hundred people in the actual studio audience. The segment with Scott and Jonathan itself was kind of cheeky, what you'd expect in 1995 on a trashy daytime talk show. Introducing the segment, Jenny Jones looks into the camera, smiling, and asks, "How would you tell your secret crush how you feel? Write a letter, maybe tell the person in private, or maybe, just maybe, tell that person, quote, that you're gay and hope that he is too on national television." At which point, the audience erupts into laughter and applause and screaming as Jenny continues to smile. After the audience calms down, Jenny introduces Scott and a friend of his, Donna, who has been helping him deal with his secret crush. If you recall, Donna lives next door to Jonathan and knows him. During this opening segment, Jonathan is backstage, Jenny points out, and he cannot hear what is going on. Scott talks about how the first time he saw Jonathan, he was at Donna's and Jonathan was working on Donna's car. The early part of this segment, it's important to note, is fraught with sexual overtones. Scott says one of his fantasies would be to tie Jonathan up in his hammock and take out some whipped cream. When the audience hears this, they begin screaming and laughing. He is hot, Scott says. Jenny stays right there. On that fantasy aspect, Scott admits he has about Jonathan. One commenter, a lawyer, later says he believed that Scott did not go on the show to embarrass Jonathan, but to tell him that he cared about him. Scott's feelings were genuine, in other words. And I think this is partly true, though Scott, from listening to him on the show, is obviously also driven by lust, playing it up a little bit for the show. He gets that he's on television. Jenny really gets things going with that fantasy angle of Scott's feelings, at times pushing Scott, who seems both embarrassed and not so sure about airing such things, but then changes course and admits to the audience another fantasy he has about Jonathan. Later, it comes out that according to people who knew Scott and spoke to him after the show, the producers wanted Scott to give Jonathan a bouquet of flowers, then try to kiss him on the stage, but Scott said not a chance in hell he was going to do that. No way. The idea from a production angle was to make the segment tacky and cheap and tawdry and brew up some kind of conflict and try to create tension. They knew Jonathan was heterosexual. He had told them during his pre-interviews. He knows that you are gay, right? Jenny asks Scott at one point early into the segment. Yeah, Scott says. Do you know if he is gay? She asks. Anything is possible, Scott says. The crowd erupts. I think you get the idea how the show plays out. We've all seen an episode of Jerry Springer. Jenny is definitely trafficking in that sort of television that wants to get the most over-the-top reactions from guests and sets out to book guests that can bring in the flames of contention, conflict, chaos. Springer will bring this to new levels, of course, in the coming years, but Jenny Jones is right there without the chair tossing and stage brawls. Jonathan then walks out onto the stage. He's so much smaller than Scott. It's so obvious. And Scott is a big guy, tall. Before Jonathan came out, Scott calls Jonathan just a tiny thing. When the two of them are side by side, you can really see the difference in size. Jonathan comes across shy and a bit rigid, even standoffish. Scott stands and embraces him, and Jonathan shakes his hand, but kind of recoils at the embrace. Do you think that Donna has a crush on you? Jenny says as Jonathan sits down. We're good friends, he says of Donna, smiling and laughing and looking over towards Scott and Donna. As he is speaking, Jenny doesn't even wait for him to finish the sentence before she says, well, guess what? It's Scott that has the crush on you. You lied to me, Jonathan says with a smile on his face, looking at Donna. And this part of the show, I must say, feels very non-reactive and somewhat tongue-in-cheek, which is what I think it is. I mean, one guy has a crush on another guy, big deal, right? What's the problem? The problem is viewing the situation through the lens of 2026, not 30-something years ago when the world for gay people was a much different place. That's the issue, I think. Jonathan even begins clapping and laughing after hearing that Scott has a crush, like it's all in good fun. Here we are on TV, having a great time, no harm, no foul. That's what this feels like. What is very interesting is what Jonathan's lawyer later tells a reporter about this moment of the show, how the lawyer casts it. Quote, I mean, he's confronted with this horrible situation on national television. You can see when you watch him that his hands go to his face in humiliation and embarrassment, end quote. That is not what I saw. Not at all. And you can Google the segment like I did and see for yourself what I am talking about. The lawyer blows it all way out of proportion. He calls it, strangely, a horrible situation. It's a situation, we should remind him, that his client agreed to be a part of. And Jonathan seems to be taking it all in stride on the show. The lawyer concludes, quote, Jenny Jones exploits Jonathan and keeps twisting the knife and twisting the knife. Jonathan never seems to get angry or in any way seems to show any sort of shock. He laughs. He tells the audience he's a straight man, and he sits right next to Scott, and it feels very much like, oh, well, you tried, but no thank you. Jonathan had been engaged to a woman for a period of time, and they had broken up a few months before the taping, which his lawyer later says played a role here. The nefarious part of all this, in my opinion, is that Jonathan had been told by the show that someone had a secret crush on him in order to get him to appear. They don't tell him it's a man. They tell him it could be a woman or a man. According to the lawyer, Jonathan is thinking that maybe he will meet someone nice. His lawyer says Jonathan even went out before the show and purchased an entire new wardrobe specifically for the appearance. After murdering Scott Amedure, Jonathan waits at the gas station. As police officers arrive, knowing he had just admitted to 911 that he killed a man with a shotgun, Jonathan gives himself up without incident. It's as though he had accomplished what he needed to do and was willing to now pay the price. His lawyer later calls Jonathan a bomb, ready to go off at any time. He does not come across this way on the show. He hides any mental illness very well. But then again, this is just a few minutes of the guy in an awkward situation, not being himself, trying to play a role for television. I have to be frank. This is a tough case, which is why I chose it. It asks us to dig deep and consider how much we've missed since this murder with regards to our understanding and empathy for those with severe mental illness. The Jenny Jones show chose ratings over human beings. And we still do this today, so we haven't learned anything. With just a bit more background checking into Jonathan's life, I believe they could have understood that he was probably not a good candidate for the show and the topic. Now, would they have quashed the segment with him if they knew about his mental health history? I don't think so. Nor would most of these types of shows today, which is why I think not much has changed in our understanding or acceptance of mental health and illness. If we are going to exploit people on television with their participation and knowledge of what is happening, make certain they are not suffering from any mental health issues is all I am saying here. Several things happen after Jonathan is arrested and charged with Scott's murder. Things that will change the landscape of television and put daytime TV on trial. Then there's Jonathan. It's hard for me to fathom what happens to him along the path of justice and its aftermath. I'll be right back after these short messages from those who sponsor Crossing the Line with M. William Phelps. Jonathan Schmitz is charged with first-degree murder. Just to clarify, because we often gloss over the various degrees of murder and what they actually mean. First-degree murder charges indicate that the alleged suspect planned intentionally to kill someone or killed someone during the act of another felony. For example, you go into a store and purchase poison. You stalk your neighbor, waiting for the right time to put the poison into his or her lemonade, carry it out, and sit back and watch the person die. Or you go into a bank to rob it and wind up killing someone. Second-degree murder is unplanned, but also intentional and is generally caused by extreme recklessness. Example, you go into a bar, get drunk, drive your boyfriend over to some friend's house, decide you are not going in. He gets out of the car as you are arguing with him. He slams the door. You take off angrily, hit and kill him, and then drive off. Third-degree murder is killing someone unintentionally by your inherent dangerous behavior. You fire a gun into a crowd and kill someone. You sell someone a lethal dose of cocaine. What Jonathan did qualifies as the most severe charge we have. He planned, sought, and carried out the murder of Scott Amedure. Jonathan's team of lawyers implore what is called the gay panic defense, known today as the gay and trans panic defense. They also toss in a diminished capacity defense. The gay panic defense is victim blaming, plain and simple. What Jonathan is saying with his defense is that he found Scott's advances so offensive and scary that Scott provoked him into reacting in the way that he did, i.e., he's blaming Scott, the victim, for instigating the murder. It's disgusting and offensive. Jonathan says he went temporarily insane when confronted with Scott's crush, and the national TV stage amplified his mental illnesses and made him commit murder. So he is blaming everyone else but himself, taking zero responsibility. Unlike he did on that 911 call. Defense attorneys James Burdick and Fred Gibson argue during Jonathan's 1996 trial that Jonathan suffered from manic depression, bipolar disorder, and untreated Graves' disease, and both led to him pulling the trigger. Twice, right? He fired twice. He didn't go over there screaming and yelling, crying in some sort of mental breakdown rage. He calmly knocked on the door, walked in, shot this man once. The man fell to his knees. He shot him again. That's cold. That's calculated. He knew what he was doing. Jonathan's lawyers claim he was humiliated by a television ambush by Jenny Jones and her producers, and also what he says were perceived ongoing advances from Scott. And all of that combined caused a psychological break. Please spare me. If he wanted to argue insanity based on his mental health status, I could see that. But to blame Scott after agreeing to go on a TV show is cowardly and ignorant. This was 1996, don't forget. Court TV was in its early phase of covering trials and aired the entire thing, billing it the TV talk show murder trial, in which many commentators proclaimed TV itself was on trial. That is so melodramatic. Jenny Jones and her producers were called to testify, and Jenny looked like a deer in the headlights during her time on the stand on national TV, I might add. She downplayed the show's role in antagonizing Jonathan. What else could she do? In the end, the jury rejected the first-degree murder charge, instead finding Jonathan guilty of second-degree murder along with a felony firearm charge. Jonathan was swiftly sentenced to 25 to 50 years in prison. Most thought that was the end. But again, not so fast. In 1998, the Michigan Court of Appeals overturned the conviction, essentially tossing the jury's verdict, all based on a technicality involving the jury selection process. For crying out loud, Really? The appeals court ordered a new trial for Jonathan Schmitz. Great. Waste more of everyone's time and money. And left behind, of course, is Scott Amedure, who still doesn't have justice. One more quick break. We'll come back and conclude this one. And if you are anything like me, you will be outraged by how it all ends. I'd like to let you know I have a new book out, the first book I've published in 5 years. It's called They Came for Blood. I have always wanted to write Westerns, a dream since my childhood. Tom Callahan was once President Ulysses S. Grant's deadliest kept secret, a lethal gun for hire leading a team of assassins nobody knew existed. Now those days are over, or so he thought. Therefore, when the past comes for blood, you either draw first or die trying. Look for They Came for Blood on Amazon.com or anywhere books are sold. Check it out. There's a lot of murder in the book, so it's not a departure from my day job. With Jenny Jones on the witness stand, the prosecution asks, "Your show was ambush television." "No," Jenny says immediately. "Absolutely it was." Jenny ambushed Jonathan Schmitz. The note that allegedly set off Jonathan, according to his lawyers, said, quote, "If you really want to get it off, I'm the only one who has the right tool," end quote. So that is the note, according to Jonathan's lawyers, that Scott left on Jonathan's doorstep that set him off. In reading that, it doesn't sound to me like Scott and Jonathan would have had a sexual encounter, as one of Scott's friends had suggested. It sounds as if Scott is trying to entice him into it. If they had spent the night together after the taping of the show, wouldn't the note be more explicit in that respect? Something like, "The other night was fun if you really wanna, whatever." Scott spoke his feelings when asked to by the producers of a television show. The subject of those feelings agreed to hear them on a television show. Jonathan participated, signed a release, knew what he was getting into. Jonathan was tried again in August 1999 and found guilty again of the exact same charges with the exact same sentence. Shocking. This murder was a calculated execution. There is no other way to phrase it. He admits to buying a gun, driving to the house, shooting him twice, calling 911. Why he did it is irrelevant. What drove him to do it is an excuse. Second-degree murder? They gave the guy a break. Scott's family filed a civil suit against the Jenny Jones show, which was owned by Warner Brothers. They ruled in their favor, and the jury awarded the family $25 million to be paid by Warner Brothers Television. Later, the amount went up to $30 million to adjust for inflation because of all the appeals. Still not over, though. In October 2023, the Michigan Court of Appeals, who apparently just couldn't keep its damn nose out of this case, reversed that jury's decision, and the show never had to pay those damages. What's more, Jonathan served 22 years, not even the lowball amount of 25 he was sentenced, and was released on parole in 2017. The only win here, if we could even consider it, is that this case ended that ambush style of television, but only for a while. As we are all aware, it came back with Jerry Springer and his security guard, that guy named Steve, who got his own show. And they carried it on for years and years and years. Over the decades, after some backlash and critique from the public and several movements, the gay panic defense was banned in just over 20 states. But even that is overshadowed by the fact that the gay panic defense is still permissible in any federal court. We never learn our lesson from history. I am entirely convinced of that. That'll do it for this week. Be safe, be aware. Sources for this episode include Murder Trial Weighs TV's Role, Karen James, New York Times, October 31st, 1996. Killer Paroled, CBS News, August 22nd, 2017. State of Michigan Court of Appeals, May 9th, 2006. And trial transcripts from Jonathan Schmitz's trial. Crossing the Line is executive produced by M. William Phelps, LLC, and Matthew Valentinus, Mom's Basement Management. Written by me, M. William Phelps. Audio mastering and mixing by Matt Russell. Music by Epidemic Sound. Original music written and performed by Thomas Mooney, Tom Phelps, and Matt Russell.